Hey gang, I got directed to a podcast called Crosstalk, which discusses topics from a biblical perspective. They had some, let's say, thoughts about the recent overturning of Roe v. Wade and the future of abortion. Let's take a look.
Matt, it didn't take long for a number of states to take this immediate action, the trigger law going into effect, and more to come after a 30-day enactment delay in others. All these abortion clinics shutting down, truly good news.
Well, that's good news for those that want to exert control over other people's bodies. Personally, I think that women, frankly, anybody who can get pregnant, should be able to make the decisions on how their bodies should be used. As a side note, yes, a small percentage of people who can get pregnant, like transgender men or non-binary individuals, don't label themselves as women, but I don't think the crosstalk hosts here generally consider anyone who falls outside of their strict binary sexual descriptors in their decisions. So, while I may use women as the people this decision affects the most, it does also apply to the other people who can get pregnant.
Oh, it's really good news. A lot of activity is taking place, but the battle now is really intensified, both in Congress with regards to trying to stop any abortion bill that would force abortion on the states.
Oh yes, heaven forbid that laws be made to allow people the decision to remain pregnant or not. I want to comment on the wording they used here. Using the term forced abortion makes it sound like abortions are being forced on people. This is not the case. Bills are being made to allow people the choice to continue their pregnancy or not. Nobody is, or ever should be, forced to have an abortion. The decision to have one should be between the pregnant person and their doctor, no one else.
Laws go into effect, even though some of them may not be total bans on abortion, like a 6-week ban is essentially a total ban on abortion, because you wouldn't even generally know that you're pregnant at that early stage.
I have to say, at least they're being honest here. Many pro-life groups attempted in the past to get around the legal and constitutional right to an abortion by passing laws that severely restricted access to it. Basically, preventing women from getting the medical care they needed because at 6 weeks they wouldn't even know they were pregnant before the window for their rights was up. At least these guys admit that the 6-week limit is, and always has been, a bad faith argument that was used to almost completely restrict women's choices in how they control their own bodies, wrapped up as a compromise that could never work in practice.
Roe, I think, is essentially on the ballot, but it's always been on the ballot, and it's going to be even more so. The problem for Democrats is there's at least 1 million, and I think that's an undercount, of people who have switched from independent and Democratic to Republican because the Democratic Party has become so one issue party, and that is a party that just pushes this radical abortion agenda.
Okay, I think they have this a bit backwards. Republicans are the ones who are more likely to be single-issue voters in regards to abortion. Specifically, the drive to drastically reduce, and now completely remove, a woman's control over her own body. Quite frankly, Democrats, or at least elected Democrat officials, had become quite blasé regarding the threat that abortion was under. For example, many were taking at face value the claims of prospective Supreme Court justices like Barrett and Kavanaugh that Roe was a settled issue, apparently forgetting they were applying for a job that would allow them to overturn settled law, and appointed by a president who specifically ran on appointing judges that would overturn Roe v. Wade.
I am putting pro-life justices on the court. I will say this, it will go back to the states.
And yes, while at the time that Crosstalk had recorded their podcast, polling had shown that while many voters had moved rightward since Biden had been elected, the sitting president losing support is apparently standard for midterms, the vastly unpopular decision to end the protections afforded by Roe v. Wade has made a lot of voters move back to the left. And while it had, at the time they recorded it, looked like the upcoming midterm election was going to be a solid Republican takeover, polling now shows that it's much closer than expected. We'll have to see how this affects things in November.
The American people are rejecting that. And the fact is, when people realize what abortion really is, that Roe allowed abortion through all 9 months of pregnancy, just up to the very moment of birth, people don't realize the evil face of abortion and that it really is the destruction, the ripping apart of innocent human beings all the way through 9 months. That's Roe v. Wade.
All right, let's start here. The vast majority of abortions take place in the first few weeks of pregnancy when the fetus is little more than a collection of cells, in no way a human being. Unsurprisingly, most women who choose to end their pregnancy generally do so as soon as they are aware they're pregnant. When an abortion takes place in the later stages of pregnancy, the mother usually wants to keep it, but is unable to, generally due to issues where the life of the mother is in jeopardy. And frankly, even before Roe was dismantled by the Supreme Court, there was a multitude of state laws that restricted how and where a mother can get an abortion, but didn't technically outlaw abortion itself.
When these employers say they will give you money to the mothers in order for the mothers to kill their children so you won't miss any time off from work, rather than give you time off from work, which is what's required by federal law. In other words, they don't want to give you the time to be a mother.
Nobody is taking away anybody's time to be a mother. If a woman wants to carry a child to term, they should have the time off needed to do so. And you know what? That time off should come with at least some pay. Shockingly, the Pro-Life Society of America has ensured that it's the only developed country that doesn't stipulate paid parental leave to all its citizens. You would think that a group that claims to care so deeply for the well-being of children would make sure that parents had the resources to care for those children after they're born as well.
They don't want you to be away from the place of work. They would rather kill your children, pay you to do so you could jump back into the workplace and you can go through their, 8-hour day or however long they're going to put you at the wheel so that they can make a profit. I mean, that's the despicable nature of what's happening, and women and others across the country ought to just really cry out and say, you despicable companies, you're paying to kill the children of these mothers so that you can continue their slave labor and continue your profits off of them.
Well, Matt, it's not only the federal government. You point out it's the corporations as well, the companies. I mean, lifenews.com, it refers to an Orange County Register story that ran just recently of this new employee benefit that Disney is giving. Will pay travel expenses so employees can go and kill their unborn babies. They don't use that term. They say quality health care.
Yes, they call it that because abortion is health care. Decisions over what happens with your body should always be determined by you. Health decisions, including carrying a pregnancy to term or not, can't help but fall under the definition of health care. As for companies covering the expense of their employees to get that health care, well, it's been a long time since my economics classes, but isn't that how capitalism is, in theory at least, supposed to work? Companies offer employee benefits they would like in order to encourage said employees to work for them. In this case, companies recognize that women want autonomy over their own bodies, and so are offering a benefit to their employees that will help them get the care they need.
While dads and moms take their children to Disney, can it be, Matt, that the proceeds of their ticket sales are helping to fund those who desire to go kill their children?
Yeah, can you imagine that? You take your little child to Disney and have a wonderful time as a family, but then you realize, well, wait a minute, the money that I just paid, the high-priced tickets now that they now charge, it's going to be used to kill unborn children. I mean, Disney, of all places, should know better.
I'm sure that Disney, and all the other companies that offer this kind of assistance to their pregnant employees, did not make such a decision in a vacuum. I'm quite confident that before announcing they'd be covering the healthcare expenses of employees that need to go out of state for medical care, that these companies considered the blowback they would get from the anti-choice crowd like those at Crosstalk. They decided it would be worth the cost to support and retain their employees. And, of course, it goes without saying that companies also consider the goodwill they'd be getting from the much larger pro-choice crowd such a policy decision would bring. It is not surprising that Disney rapidly took such a proactive stance on abortion after the, frankly unsuccessful, have-it-both-ways stance they took regarding LGBT rights in Florida earlier this year. Claiming they support the LGBT community, but also financially supporting DeSantis' campaign, which was not exactly friendly to anybody who didn't fall into the cisgendered hetero paradigm.
The fact is, this is a death culture that is so blind to the reality that they think that you just have to have abortion in order to exist. The fact is that abortion is the killing of innocent children. And any entity, any company, any administration, any politician that supports that is just, completely pushing evil.
That all depends on your definition of evil. I'm more inclined to say that forcing a woman to carry unwanted pregnancies, in effect, changing anyone who can get pregnant into nothing more than walking incubators, would be pushing evil. I have this thing for autonomy. I generally think that people should be able to control how their body is used. If someone doesn't want to carry a child, they shouldn't be forced to.
Look at some of these companies, Adidas, Airbnb, Amazon, American Express, Apple, AT&T, Bank of America, Chobani, Citigroup, Dick's Sporting Goods, DoorDash, Grubhub, Hewlett-Packard, Johnson & Johnson, JP Morgan, Kroger's, Live Nation, Lyft, Macy's, MasterCard, Microsoft, Netflix, Nike, PayPal, Sony, Starbucks, Tesla, Uber, Zillow, and many others. I mean, it's just staggering to see these companies that are lining up to really destroy, their future customers.
I think there are more than enough future customers for these companies. People haven't stopped having kids, but they want to control when and how they have them. In fact, most abortions are had by women who already have children. There are going to be more than enough future customers for all these companies. By their logic, any company that does anything to help people plan when a pregnancy happens is, in their words, destroying their future customers, which is just ridiculous. I mean, more than 5 billion condoms are sold a year, and even if they were destroying future customers, it seems there's enough of a demand to keep that industry afloat.
5 billion? I'm probably responsible for a good chunk of that.
Yeah. Wait a minute. I don't wear them when we're together.
What's your point?
Oh.
Yeah, they're not only destroying their future customers, they're destroying the families. Some of those women will die. Some of those women will be completely infertile. Some of those will have psychological repercussions. Some of those are going to have physical repercussions as well, infertility and so many other things.
This is nothing but unfounded fear-mongering. Yes, with abortion, like any medical procedure, there's a chance for complications. But the risk to women getting an abortion is substantially lower than a woman carrying a pregnancy to term. In other words, it's more dangerous for a woman to decide to remain pregnant than to choose to have an abortion. Now, if you're talking about back alley abortions, the kind that will be on the increase due to the ending of Roe and the implementation of laws restricting women's choices, then there will definitely be an increase in harm and even death to women, something the pro-life team seems to not have a problem with. If you were really concerned about the health and safety of women, then you would recognize that making abortions illegal doesn't reduce the number of abortions. It reduces the options for safe ones, resulting in more women harmed, something you claim to be worried about. In fact, the new laws out there are actually putting women's lives at risk when there are complications with their pregnancies. Due to the wording and restrictions on what doctors can do for their patients, many doctors are unable, legally, to provide life-saving procedures for women facing complications from pregnancy. The pro-life lobby considers these women's lives expendable in their pursuit of control over decisions that people should have over their own lives.
But, these companies, they just want to, drain the last ounce of sweat out of their workers so that they can continue to make a profit. So they're, willing to pay people to literally kill their children. I mean, how incredibly evil is that? Imagine if they said, we would actually take your 6-month-old child. I know that you have to find a babysitter and all that, and you have to take time off when the baby is sick. Let's just get rid of that inconvenience, and why don't we just send it over to a different state, and we'll just get rid of it, take care of it for you. That's no different. It's no different. It's the same thing.
This is completely different. If a parent has a fully developed child, that is, or at least was, something they chose to have. Once the child is born, it's an autonomous being. I'm going to say this again. A fetus, especially at the stage when most abortions occur, is nothing more than a clump of cells. Even the fetal heartbeat, used to justify the bad faith 6-week ban, is nothing more than a few cells moving, and is nothing close to being what anyone would consider an actual heartbeat.
This is the brutality of these companies. These companies in these states that go down this road, they will not be blessed. They will ultimately be complicit with the shedding of innocent blood. And we'll look back on those companies just like we look back on some of the things that happened during Nazi Germany and say, shame on you. How in the world did this ever happen?
You know what? I'm not trying to get into Godwin territory here, but a pro-choice position is pretty much the opposite of what was occurring in Germany during the period the Nazis were in control. The people who fit the Nazi ideal did not have the choice to terminate a pregnancy if they wanted to, and there were forced abortions on populations that the Nazis did not support. Basically, restricting women's choices on how to control their bodies. I'm going to go on a limb here and say, I disagree with the Nazis on this. Come at me for that one, cancel culture.
It's just completely insane thinking that these people have. They're so committed to abortion.
Oh yeah, it's completely insane that people are committed to Let me check my notes here. Allowing women to do what they want with their own bodies. Yep, that's just nuts. I love that the "don't tread on me, make government so small we can drown into a bathtub" crowd is the one committed to controlling the choices other people can make about their own bodies.
Where in the Constitution is the right to abortion? Can you just point me to some provision, maybe several provisions? Give me something. They couldn't do it. You know, Senator Warren, show me in the Constitution where a right was taken away. Schumer, show me where there's a constitutional provision. It's not there. There was no right taken away. This was never part of the Constitution.
Okay, so I don't specialize in American constitutional law. Hell, I'm not even a lawyer. Hell, I'm not even American. But, as I understand it, the 14th Amendment includes a right of personal privacy, or a guarantee of certain areas or zones of privacy. Sorry. Certain areas or zones of privacy. Y'all. Basically, it's saying that everybody has the right to control their own body. You can't take someone's kidney for your own use without their consent, and someone's uterus shouldn't be used if they don't want it to be. The fact that the current court disagrees that people should have control of their own body should be worrying for everyone. But Matt is correct. The exact words "right to an abortion" themselves. But Matt is correct. The exact words "right to an abortion" themselves do not exist in the Constitution. Matt here is one of the guys that would argue there ain't no rule saying a dog can't play on a sports team, like Air Bud, or Air Bud 2 Gold Receiver, or Air Bud 3 World Pup, or Air Bud 4 7th Inning Fetch. Okay, I like that title. That's a good one. Or Air Bud 5 Spikes Back. And yes, while using the "there ain't no rule" option can lead to a fun, family-friendly film about a boy whose father was just killed in a plane crash? Really? Bonding with a lovable dog that he stole from his trainer and legal owner? What? Anyway, it shouldn't be used to take away the right of a woman to control her own body. Look, I don't like abortion, but studies show that banning it will not reduce the number of abortions. What it will do is reduce the number of safe options for women. You really want to reduce the number of abortions? Make birth control easier to obtain and reduce the stigma attached to using it, while increasing sex education in classes so children understand their own bodies better. And if you're really pro-life, make sure that parents have the support they need to properly raise their kids. Yes, unplanned pregnancies will still occur, but at a much lower rate, and will reduce the number of women who need to terminate their pregnancies.